I hope all of you are having fantastic Wednesdays where we may be across this great country or this great land. Some positive news for Major League Baseball last night. The Marlins, who have been out of commission for what feels like forever, finally returned to play last night with, I think it was 18 new players as a part of their overall roster, and they won, which means I don't even know how this exactly is going to work out, but they are now 3-1, and I believe would have nearly the best record in the National League right now, and they would be, I think, the top team in the NL East if you just went by win percentage. Now, the Atlanta Braves have played 12 games, which is crazily enough 1/5 of the season already. The Marlins have only played 4, so they have a full 8 games to try and make up at some point in time. But they won last night, and they're sitting at 3-1. So that's going to be a crazy story to follow, particularly in the context of an expanded postseason when you actually go out and look and think about what might happen going forward for them. So the Marlins are back playing. I believe I am correct in this. It's like whack-a-mole for Major League Baseball. Now the Cardinals are the only team that is not able to play. Now, granted, when there is a team that can't play, whoever is going to play them is also not able to play. But I think in a positive sense, if you are a Major League Baseball fan, again, knock on wood, furiously, let's hope that this is a point of things getting better. I believe baseball is down to just one team that can't play now, and that is the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, again, that impacts whether other teams can play or not, but that is a story that is certainly worth following going forward, is what's going to happen with the Marlins if they win a roundabout fashion with the best record in the NL by avoiding playing 8 games. It's pretty wild to think about. The Braves and the Mets have both played 12 games in the NL East, and the Miami Marlins and the Philadelphia Phillies have only played 4 each. So one of the things that baseball is going to have to deal with is this lopsided schedule, and certainly it's why they have added in 7-inning doubleheaders. So I would think, for instance, in the case of the Marlins and the Phillies, there will be a lot of doubleheaders in their futures. But in the meantime, that is a pretty wacky story in order to be following as Major League Baseball comes, I think it's fair to say, roaring back. The other thing that is standing out there is, and I don't want Laker fans to get nervous, but you should be nervous. You should be nervous about this early round potential chaos in the NBA. The Trailblazers are a pretty good basketball team. They almost beat the Celtics in their second game. They beat the Grizz in the first game. And now in their third game, they came out and they handled the Houston Rockets, who had been playing pretty well. And if you look at the standings and start to project where we are headed, I don't think it's crazy at all to believe that the Portland Trailblazers have a really good chance to be the overall number 8 seed in the NBA's Western Conference. And if that is going to end up happening, then I would be a little bit nervous if I'm a Laker fan. Because Portland, with the injuries healed, remember last year they lost in the NBA's Western Conference Finals. They got swept by the Warriors. Kind of fell apart there. But they've had a decent amount of success in the postseason, at least in last year's season. And this is interesting to think about because the Grizz got, I think it's Jaren Jackson, right, who's out for the rest of the season with a meniscus tear. So the Grizz are 0-3, and they're staring down the barrel of a 2-6, a 1-7, maybe even an 0-8 return in the NBA bubble. And for a long time, they had a 3.5-game lead on everybody else in the NBA Western Conference when this thing started back up. But I actually think the Grizz are going to fall out of the playoffs completely, and you're going to have 2 different teams at that 8-9 play-in battle to figure out who is going to be going up against the Lakers as the number 1 seed in the West. And If Portland had been healthy throughout, and we're going to talk to Chris Mannix about this in hour 3, he's our NBA insider. If Portland had been healthy throughout, that's probably a team that's around a 4 seed in the NBA playoffs. And they match up pretty well if you think about C.J. McCollum and Dame Lillard at the guard positions in a way that, frankly, the Lakers might not with Avery Bradley and Rajon Rondo issues at the guard position. Certainly, it's going to be hard to cover Anthony Davis. It's going to be hard to cover LeBron James for anybody. But I think the Trailblazers would match up pretty well with the Lakers and potentially be able to take them to a 6 or 7 game series in the first round of the NBA playoffs. But that's assuming Portland's even the 8 seed, because I think if you're a Spurs fan, you have to feel a little bit optimistic. If you are a Pelicans fan, you can sit back and say, hey, maybe we've got a shot after all, even though we lost our first 2, of getting into that 8-9 matchup and giving ourselves a chance to advance into the playoffs. There are a lot of moving parts here. And again, I mean, there are a lot of tough games for everybody left. But you look at the Grizz, and the Grizz to me look very, very likely to be falling apart and to continue to fall apart. So one of the early storylines from the NBA bubble could be the collapse of the Grizzlies. And the Grizzlies, by the way, played the early game today. They are a 5-point underdog against the Utah Jazz. If they lose that game to go to 0-4 in the bubble, coming up, they play the Thunder in a game that I think they would be an underdog in. Then they play against the Raptors in a game that I think certainly they would be an underdog in. Then they play the Celtics, who they would certainly be an underdog in. And then the hope would be, if you're the Grizz, that the Bucks are resting everybody for the 8th game. But I think there's a very decent chance that the Grizz are going to go 1-7 or 0-8 as they come back in the bubble and knock themselves completely out of the NBA's playoff race. And we'll see exactly whether or not that ends up being the case. But it's early, I guess, in some ways in the bubble, halfway through with the Grizz playing their 4th out of 8 games. But it feels like a game that they absolutely, positively must win. And by the way, if you're out there and you're thinking to yourself, I can barely keep up with everything that's going on in the world of sports right now, join the team, because there are so many games going on every day right now, from basically noon Eastern all the way to midnight Eastern, that it's almost impossible to keep up with everything. I mean, we've got the PGA starting tomorrow. We got bumped on Lock It In today because the Yankees have a rain delay makeup on FS1. So there are so many sports going on, we can't even get geared up and be able to do our show. And the PGA is coming roaring back. The PGA Championship is going to start tomorrow. And as if there weren't enough already zaniness going on, I'm going to get to the PGA in a minute because I think there's an interesting storyline associated with it. The PGA right now is outrating everyone, and I've got a theory on why that is. But let me go ahead and bring in Laker superfan Danny G and ask you this. Are you nervous about the Trailblazers potentially as the 8 seed going up against the Lakers in the first round of the playoffs?
No, because unlike you, I'm not a Laker hater.
I'm not a hater. I just look at it and I say the Trailblazers are, a legitimate 3 or 4 or 5 seed if they had been healthy throughout the whole season.
It's just recently that you've jumped on the Portland Trailblazer bandwagon.
No, it's just recently that we've had games to talk about. So I'm jumping on a bandwagon because there's actual games going on.
Right, but before the season paused, I don't remember you being so high on the Trailblazers.
They had two starters who weren't going to play the rest of the season.
Okay, but even when they're healthy, who's going to guard LeBron or AD from the Blazers?
Who's going to guard in their backcourt? CJ McCollum or Dame Lillard?
I mean, honestly, Carmelo is one of the hottest players on the Trailblazers right now, and you're thinking he's going to lead the way with Dame to knock out the Lakers? I mean, they could give the Lakers a good fight, but the Lakers aren't going down in the first round.
Would you cry?
No, I would not cry.
I think you would cry.
No.
Danny,
this season's already been a W because...
Do you think Danny G would cry if the Lakers lost in the first round of the Trailblazers?
Shoot, man, I almost cried the other day when the Spurs blew it against the 76ers. So, I mean, you're not shedding tears for that. Then I think
he might cry. What do you think, Eddie? Do you think he would cry?
He would cry into his giant purple and gold pillow.
Yeah.
Clay, it was just last summer I don't know if you remember the show, but you and Doug Gottlieb and I were filling in for the Dan Patrick Show. And the two of you were trying to convince me that morning that the Lakers would be lucky, you guys said, if they made the playoffs this season.
I don't believe that.
Yeah.
That's fake news.
No, it's not fake news. You said LeBron
news.
Was going to continue getting injured and his run was over.
Still might.
Oh boy, here we go.
Still might.
Yeah. Well, you keep betting against the Lakers, and the Lakers will keep winning.
I don't know. I think you're going to be crying. I think you're going to come in.
I think you're going to be losing money on Lock It In / Fox Bet Live.
You're going to come in and you're going to be crying, and I'm going to feel sorry for you. I'm going to say, "What's the matter?" And you're going to say, "But the Lakers lost. Oh, the Trailblazers hate the stupid bubble."
Yeah, you don't even know if the Blazers are going to make the 8th spot. They got to get in first.
Well, I feel like the Grizz are going to lose 8 in a row. So there's one team that's out of the mix.
I feel like Zion and the Pelicans, they really had the best chance here if they had been on top of things and playing their best ball.
They can still get in.
Well, I know they can, but everyone seems to be choosing against them. But they have the easiest schedule right now going into the playoffs.
Well, where does the Grizz going potentially 0-8 and blowing a 3.5 game lead in the NBA's Western Conference? And I know they've had injury issues and everything else, but this is still would go down as one of the most epic choke jobs to miss the playoffs of all times, right? I mean, to come in with a 3.5 game lead, and again, maybe they'll win today, maybe they'll beat the Jazz, but if they lose, they'll be halfway to 0-8. And you look at those final 4, and unless like the Bucks are resting everybody for the final game, they're going to be an underdog in every game that they play. I just look at it and I say, man, that could be a mess. So let me get Dub. You're a Spurs fan, Dub. When you look at who's going to be in the 8, first of all, does everybody agree that the only interesting thing left in the NBA bubble at this point is who's going to be the 8-9 game? Because otherwise the seeding really doesn't matter. It's about whether you get in the playoffs or not. And the question was, are the Grizzlies going to be able – if they were 4 games or more above the 9th team, there would have been no playoff at all. I don't think the Grizzlies are even going to be in the 8-9 matchup right now, trying to project out. But is there anybody who doubts, I'll go around the horn, that we are going to have an 8-9 play-in in the NBA playoffs? In other words, the Grizz are not going to find a way. I don't even know if they're mathematically hardly possible to do it now. But the Grizz are not going to find a way to win the 8 seed outright.
Yeah,
and it's unlikely anybody else would be able to do that either from a purely mathematical perspective.
Yeah, the headline this morning, how the Grizzlies' woes have changed the West.
Yeah.
No kidding, they choked.
So 8-9 is going to happen. Who are going to be the 8-9? I'll start with you, Dub, because I've already talked to Danny G a little bit, and I'll come back to him. But you are a Spurs fan. Who would you forecast is going to be in that basically play-in scenario?
I think you're right. I don't think the Grizzlies are going to be in this, and obviously I am a Spurs fan, but I think Portland's going to end up with the 8 spot when this is all done. And I think the Spurs, the way they've been playing, are going to end up in the 9. Their schedule's not as tough as Memphis is. Memphis maybe had the hardest schedule in the entire bubble when you look at it top to bottom. They had a chance their first 2 games to get some wins. Those are their easiest games by far. So I don't think they're going to go 0-8, but I think 1-7 is looking fairly likely for the Grizzlies, and I think Portland in San Antonio are going to have the battle for the 8 seed.
And whoever, if you're wondering, like, okay, why does it matter who gets the 8 seed? Whoever gets the 8 seed only has to win 1 game. If you are the 9 seed, you have to win 2. So basically you get 2 bites at the apple if you are the 8 seed. And if you're the 9 seed, you have to win back-to-back games, which can be tough to pull off any time of the year. What about you, Eddie? Who do you think are in the 8-9, or have you even been paying attention at all?
Well, there's no one better to ask than the guy who's been watching, 5 hockey games a day.
How many hockey games are you watching a day right now?
I think I've missed 1 so far.
So this is actually interesting. And if you are a hockey fan, is this the greatest thing that's ever existed in the history of the NHL? Because not only are they playing, I think it's 6 games every day, right? They're all playoff games. And they start at like
9 in the morning Pacific time.
9 in the morning Pacific time, noon Eastern, and they go all day. I mean, this is like the wildest thing ever to go straight into the playoffs and play. It's 6 games every day, basically, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And literally I wake up and there's hockey on, and then I leave to come to work and there's still hockey going on. They're wrapping up the final game of the night. So it's crazy. I mean, look, I very much missed hockey. I'm not going to say it's too much, but it's a ton of hockey. I mean, it's just wall-to-wall hockey all day long.
Is this sneakily, because I think a lot of people are just getting used to this, is this the greatest time in the history of American sports in terms of having this much to watch? Because think about tomorrow. If you are a golf fan, the PGA is back tomorrow. You will have a golf major. You will have the NHL playoffs in a way that you have never seen them before, all day long, every day. You will have Major League Baseball, with the exception of the Cardinals and whoever the Cardinals are supposed to be playing against, going 100% of the time. And you will have the NBA rolling. And I think, is there a UFC event this weekend too?
There is, yeah.
So there's a UFC event on top of that, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody's favorite sport. And I'll get tweeted about, what about the National Lacrosse League? What about the W? Okay, yeah. If you're a WNBA fan, there are WNBA is also going on. And so I need to put up a poll question about what our audience is watching the most. But sneakily, I think we have entered the month of August with the possibility that August is the greatest month in the history of American sports in terms of overall availability. And next month, September has the possibility to be the greatest month in the history of American sports even more, because you theoretically would have the NFL back, and you would have potentially, hopefully, fingers crossed the Corona Bros don't win, college football back. All still while you would have the NBA, the NHL, Major League Baseball going, and that would continue into October, but there wouldn't be just the sheer number of games in October like there would be in September. I mean, we've truly never seen anything like this. I think it's the greatest buffet, the greatest overwhelming sheer amount of games that we've ever seen in the history of the month of August. Who's going to be the 8-9, Danny G?
I'm going to say Trailblazers Pelicans.
Trailblazers Pelicans.
Yeah.
So that would be an interesting matchup as well. So all of that is coming together. We got a ton of different sports rolling. I've got a question for you that I'm going to put up as a poll question. I'll bring in the crew when we come back. You can only watch one. Which of the 4 sports are you going to watch this weekend? With the PGA starting on Thursday, Tiger Woods is back. Are you going to watch golf? You're going to watch the NBA? You're going to watch Major League Baseball? Or you're going to watch the NHL? All 4 of them starting tomorrow are going to be roaring down the weekend stretch. Which of those 4 are you going to watch? Remember also, I don't know, I haven't even looked at the television schedule, but we got a West Coast PGA Championship. So I'm assuming that on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we'll have a later ending, right? On Saturday and Sunday, the PGA will actually be in prime time. That happens every now and then. Am I correct in that? Somebody look up the television schedule. My expectation would be on Saturday and Sunday, we will have an evening PGA Championship being crowned with because they're playing in San Francisco. So I would think that will finish later. Like when they have the U.S. Open on the West Coast, you get a primetime U.S. Open. This would be a primetime, I think, PGA Championship, which would lead to even more people watching, which I'm going to talk about next.